Hi, Rock Board members. Jeremiah from Cooperative Development Institute here. Here's a first video for treasurers. But really, if I could pick one video for all board members to watch to understand how their co-op is doing financially, it would be this one on understanding budget variances. It sounds a little boring, I know, but it's a powerful skill, and I'm going to do my best to try to make it interesting. So here it goes. As you know, every year, your co-op members pass a budget, which is a plan for how your co-op spends its money throughout the year. 500 is planned for office supplies, 5,000 is planned for plowing, and so on. Understanding budget variances is what bean counters call looking at how the reality of your co-op spending compares to your plan, your budget. For example, let's say at the beginning of this year, I made a personal budget plan because I was spending way too much on fast food every week, and money was tight. Here's an example of just some items on my budget plan for spending every month. $900 on rent, $50 on my cell phone, $75 on electricity, and $60 is what I'm trying to keep my restaurant spending at monthly. Now, understanding how I spend throughout the year compared to my budget plan is a 4-step process. First, it requires looking at an overview report that compares the plan to reality. This allows us to locate the areas where things aren't going according to plan, so we can then drill down and understand why. Second, to understand the backstory of why the reality isn't lining up to the plan, we have to look at an expense detail report for the culprit categories in step 1. The info provided here may be enough on its own, but if not, it can help us locate individual bills and actions that need even more investigation. Step 3 involves drilling down all the way to the specific bills or actions in question to paint a full picture. Step 4 involves, if possible, coming up with specific things to do moving forward so that we can keep the real spending in line with the plan. Let's take a look at how an overview report works in step 1, using my personal finance example. This report is called a profit and loss budget versus actual report. This is a version that is comparing the plan to the reality for just 1 month. Your financials also include one that compares the plan to reality for where you're at this point in the fiscal year as well. Now, this would take a little work for me as an individual to prepare, but the good news is your property manager prepares a report for you that does just this every month. Using this example, you can see my monthly budget for a few expenses in the middle column in blue. To the left, you can see a column called Actual in green. That is what I really spent for the month. To the right, there's a difference column, which shows how well I did or didn't do compared to my plan. Looking at this difference column, you can see that I paid my rent just as planned and that my electricity bill came in pretty close to what I expected. However, and this is where this type of report is powerful, you can see that the reality is a bit different from the plan when it comes to my cell phone bill and my attempt to spend less at restaurants. I am under budget with my cell phone. In fact, it appears I may not have paid it at all. And I am over budget with restaurants by $40, despite trying to rein in things on that front. For both of these types of situations, being significantly over budget or under budget, we really need to drill down and continue to steps 2 and 3 to have a better understanding of what's going on. And this is exactly what we mean by understanding budget variances. Step 2 involves looking at a detail report that will look something like this to see what is going on with the culprit cell phone and restaurant categories. The real detail report for your ROC, called a general ledger, will be produced by your property manager automatically every month and included in your financials. Here you can see the categories from my personal budget on the left, and then a lot of details on how I spent money in these areas throughout the month. Don't pay so much attention to the balance column on the right for now. That's totaling up how much spending is going on in various categories throughout the fiscal year. The most important column to focus on is the amount column. You can see there's no real activity in the cell phone category since the previous report indicated nothing was spent there. So we'll have to wait for step 3 to figure out the full story there. Now let's look at the restaurant detail to see why I'm over budget there. You can see I got some pretty cheap tacos twice in February, but the big culprit that put me over the top was going to a place called Fancy Establishment for what appears to be my friend's birthday. Oops. To fully understand how I went over budget with restaurants, we go on to step 3 and look for the bill itself. These are also included in your financial packet every month at the very end.
It will take some thumbing or scrolling through to find it, and I'll show you what this thumbing through will look like when we try this with a ROX financial packet after. But eventually we will find a bill or receipt from fancy restaurant for $80 that looks something like this. Now I really know what happened, down to the time and items I splurged on. Step 4, or coming up with a possible plan to stop overspending here moving forward, would be to not go to that restaurant or any fancy restaurants for a long time. Understanding why there wasn't a cell phone payment in step 3 is clearly a different procedure, since there isn't a receipt to look up. Drilling down in this case would involve calling the company, going to their website, or looking at bills from earlier months to understand the backstory. Fortunately for you and your ROC, you have a property manager that can help you figure out what's going on with these types of cases. That's pretty much the gist of how to better understand budget variances. Let's recap and then look at an example using a real ROC's financials. Step 1, use the profit and loss budget versus actual report to identify areas where overspending and underspending is taking place. Step 2, use the general ledger report to try to understand why the over and underspending is happening. Step 3, if necessary, drill down further to the source, such as the bills themselves, to fully understand the variances. And step 4, if possible, come up with a suggestion to correct the problem. Now let's try to do this with a ROC's real set of financials. Here we're looking at a co-op set of financials from a few years ago. First, for step 1, scroll or thumb to the month's profit and loss budget versus actual report. You can see some of the columns that are similar to what we were looking at earlier. There's a budget column, which has the co-op's monthly plan for spending. To the left of that is the actual column, the one that has the May 2018 heading. Immediately to the right of the budget column is the column that shows how the reality of spending for that month compares to the plan in dollars. And to the right of that is a column that shows the difference as a percentage. Now the top rows of this report compare real income coming into the co-op compared to the budget. Let's skip over this for now and look at the expenses. You can see there are a number of things here that differ from the budget. That's not uncommon. I recommend starting by looking at real spending by big categories such as administrative, operating, and utilities, and seeing how they compare to the plan first, and then identifying the biggest culprits within those categories from there. You can see that the administrative expenses are under budget, operating is over budget, and utilities are way over budget by almost $8,000. Let's take a look at this category. The biggest culprit is clearly water. It appears that the co-op spent $18,000 in 1 month on water. Yikes. If you're just getting started with this, I recommend skipping over the overarching loan and insurance, taxes, and reserves categories and focus on admin, operating, and utilities. Loans, insurance, taxes, and reserves are 4 categories that are always going to show up with some weird variances on this report here. This is due to a formatting issue with your ROC's reports that affects just these categories, and they're not due to actual over or underspending. I'll be making another video to explain what's going on here. Simply disregard the loan, insurance, taxes, and reserve categories for now. You can rest assured that your lender is most likely automatically withdrawing these payments out of your account every month, and we can move on for now. Let's go on to step 2 with water and try to understand what's going on. I'm going to scroll through and find the general ledger report further down in the financials. The general ledger is a long report, as it shows every single transaction for the co-op over the course of the month. To quickly get to the expenses, go to the end of this report and then work backwards. Expenses are always in the last 1 to 3 pages of the general ledger. They are listed in the same order that they were listed on the last budget versus actual report, starting with administrative categories, then operating. with utilities closer to the end. Here are the water bills. You can see there are 3 all paid on the same day. Since I know this co-op has 3 meters and regularly gets 3 bills, and you might be able to see these meter numbers and billing dates, I can rule that out as the reason for the problem. It's the fact that the amounts are so high that's the problem here. To have a better handle on this, we need to move on to step 3 and find the bills themselves. Time for more scrolling. The bills are all the way at the back of your financial packets. So scroll to the end and work backwards until you find the water bills that correspond with these amounts. Here's one for $11,474, which corresponds to the amount in the bill on the general ledger, and this has lots of useful information. For example, I can see the park's water usage for this month compared to the same time last year. Wow, the park is using a lot more water. What about the other meters bills? Same thing. Okay, so we have a better handle on what's going on here. The park is simply using a lot of water all of a sudden, and we have plenty of info to report out to the board and to help investigate the matter even further. What would step 4 look like in this case? Well, it's not as easy as not going to a fancy restaurant like in my personal finance example. I can tell you that after this board found out about this big variance, the co-op quickly took action and hired a vendor to come in and check all the water lines for leaks. And lo and behold, they found a lot of them that cropped up over the winter. Then they fixed the leaks and brought the water bills down substantially.
That's going to do it for this video. I hope you learned something. I really encourage you to take the lessons from this video and to try to use them with your co-op's financial statements, really honing in on 2 or 3 things that seem significantly over or under budget. I'm going to index different points of this video in the description below so you can quickly jump around to the key points to help you do this moving forward. So thanks a bunch, take care, and rock on.